Yeah,
Brilliant.
so Adam, if you do need any, if you need a sounding board or anyone to sort of run any ideas by, then give me a shout, because
Yeah,
I think I'm not sure that you're aware, because I think it was pre your days at Babington, but I did a lot of work with the DWP and with subcontractors to build maths and English programs, and also did quite a lot of work building ECDL when that was funded and trained to gain.
I think you'll probably, well, you may or may not be aware then that Carol Carson is now chairwoman at DBC.
Oh, I didn't know. I know Carol very well.
Yeah, so she's taken on that role. So
such a small world.
Well, indeed.
It is, and if you're in the East Midlands, then chances are you stay within the East Midlands type thing. So yeah, Carol is over there as non-exec chairperson. Is it chairman, chairwoman, chairperson?
Chairperson, I think.
I just get told it's called chair or governor. Yeah, that's what I tend to use.
Carol's the chair. Francis is there as chief operating officer as well. So obviously I know Francis.
What, Francis Drew?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So she's there. There's a couple of others that are probably after your time. There's a guy called Anthony Smith, who is there as, so he was bid manager and headed up a lot of the bid stuff for Babington. So I worked really closely with him when I was there around, public funding, but also employer side of presentations and pitches. So he's there. Obviously I'm joining. So it's a little bit like some of the Babington people that didn't necessarily agree with the direction that Babington was going in are drawing themselves all together again. So fingers crossed it's useful and it all becomes successful, because that's what we all want.
Yeah, so. I'm not surprised that Fran is like still with her mom, but I'm surprised that she moved from where she was, because she looked like she was getting a really strong hold and was going. So what's going on there must be really, really exciting, because she wouldn't move easily.
No, I think that we kept in touch, and I think we both had a similar conversation around Christmas in terms of going from Babington to a college environment was a bit of a shock in terms of the pace of change, the bureaucracy, going to Activate Learning as she did and to Part L&D as I did. It was almost like we thought we were going into another private provider, but actually it was just the facade, and behind the scenes everything was college group driven and whatever. So I think we both kind of got a bit bogged down.
Very restrictive, isn't it? College
and the pace of change wasn't. I mean, I was looking about 6 months ago at introducing new programs for 21, 22. And I'm like, that's 18 months away. We can't take that long to build a new program and roll it out. So it was that kind of thing, and the willingness and openness to accept combinations of funding. It was like, well, no, you can't use AEB while you're on an apprenticeship. It's like, no, you can. That's absolutely fine. You've just got to make sure that it's evidenced and it's being delivered in a way that you can split the two off. So
I didn't realise you could, to be honest. That's interesting.
Oh,
yeah, you can. Yeah, think about it. The maths and English is funded through AEB, and maths and English is funded outside the apprenticeship.
Oh, of course it is. Yeah, of course it is.
So you draw that for separate funding, but you'll also be able to draw the funding now for the essential digital skills, and that's from August. And there are some awarding organisations now that, well, there's one that I know of that has been approved, and there's one or two that are quite close. So where I was a little bit wary a few weeks ago of whether it would be ready to roll, it is ready to roll now. So I think it is a really realistic option. And I think, going into a new contract year, there's some really, really sound stuff. And touching on, again, going back to what I said, Adam, about building those programs, and if you want support, that's even pre-Babington. So all the work that I talked about with building those programs, working with the NHS, working with DWP, it's all before Babington bought Training for Today.
Yeah.
So that'll even be work that I've done in the past that Carol won't even be aware of.
Oh, she will. She knows everything.
No, she does. She does.
Yeah.
But when you talk to her, please, I will pass on my regards to both of them.
Yes, I will do.
I've got a lot of time for both of them. They're really.
I'm seeing them both on Friday, so
I'll
say hello for you. But I think, Erica, going back to your not quite being sure, what we've done is we've looked at what apprenticeship people are on, and then how we can enhance their experience. So one of the examples, of quite an easy one, level 3 team leader, we're offering them mental health awareness. It's not within the apprenticeship, so you're not claiming double funding for it. We're using the Skills Network's kind of platform, so it's all delivered wholly online. We can make sure that it's done outside of work time because we can see when they're logging in, logging out. But it enhances their team leader apprenticeship.
Yeah, definitely. I
So
can
it's
definitely
things like
see the
that
need
we've
for that.
looked at to combine together. And actually, you can probably get 2 or 3 within the duration of the apprenticeship. And if they are on low wage, you can claim full funding as well. So it's not even co-funded. It's fully funded.
So do they get another certificate as part of that then for what's funded through? Oh, okay, that's interesting.
I don't think I'm talking out of turn here, Adam, but have you had any contact with LearnBox and Lucy Dunn-Levy?
No.
They're doing some interesting work with NCFE, and they're doing something around, I think from what she was saying the other day, it's like suicide, and there's some qualifications that are being built around that as well. So that might be another interesting route for you.
I did have a chat with David Gallagher at NCFE the other day, because obviously he used to be my line manager, so we kept in touch as well. And he was saying
it is a small world, isn't it?
Yeah.
Did everybody work at Babington?
All the good ones did, yeah.
I didn't, but I used to work for Dave Marsh, who's now the CEO of Babington. In our British Gas days.
Oh, Paul, do you feel left out here?
Paul hasn't got a word in edgeways yet.
Sorry, I used to work with David at Working Links. I know.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, so I don't feel left out.
Good.
But yeah, I think some of the stuff that
Funny.
NCFE are doing, and I think there's going to be more demand for that around, well, okay, everyone's doing apprenticeships, and really you've got the choice of ILM or CMI if you're doing leadership and management. So how do you distinguish that? You've either got, we do more face-to-face stuff, or actually no, we do more distance learning, and you're kind of splitting hairs. So I think the way that I particularly am looking at it is, well, what can you do that makes that generic course more specific to certain industries? And whether that is, we work with a couple of NHS trusts where we put to them, we're going to do your team leader for your sort of admin staff or care homes or whatever, but we're also going to do dementia awareness, because although it's not part of your direct role, you're in that environment, you're working in a care home, so actually that's important. Or infection control. You know, it's not your ultimate job, it's not your responsibility, but you're in that sector, you're in that environment, it can't hurt to know it. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to not create bespoke programs that, like Erica, you would go in and do specifically for a client, because we've got the red lines of all of the funding and the criteria and all of that. But actually you can create programs sort of pick and mix style. And I think that's going to be important for separating out one provider from another, and who's willing to do it, and actually who's got the best funding access to make sure that that is done free at the point of delivery to the employer. And I think going back to where I'm going to, they've got a couple of arrangements in place with staffing and recruitment agencies for levy transfer. So actually that's going to allow for their levy to be passed on to employers. It will help them because they'll get more people wanting to use them because they've got the fully funded training available through the levy transfer. It will help the training providers who have got those arrangements to offer out stuff to SMEs who would have to pay for it. So there's a lot of moving pieces, but I think whoever can marshal them into the right kind of format has got an opportunity to pick up some quick.
I think induction's a really important one as well, Adam, and including the employer and everything in that. So again, if you want to have a conversation, but I would suggest, if you haven't already, I think it would be really good to talk to Lucy, because of that. I think they're doing some work in the NHS as well. And so, you know, I think those, if you make those connections, even if you don't engage with LearnBox, it's good to know where their fingers are and what they're doing, because that might be something that you come across, and I think being informed will really help you when you're having those conversations.
Yeah, definitely. Was it today it was meant to be functional skills? I know
Yes.
we've got yeah.
Yes, I was doing a masterclass.
I thought that Lucy might be in on that because of what
Yeah.
I thought she might have been able to join us, and we could have had that. But I've joined because I used to be a functional skills tutor, so I was like, oh, that's interesting. Let's see how it's all moved on in the 6 years or so.
Oh, you don't mean, oh, that's interesting. Let's see how much Christine really does know. Joke.
No. It was, I haven't done anything for, when was the last time I taught? I probably haven't taught since 2013, 2014. So it's sort of 6 or 7 years. And I've done bits and pieces, but not whole programs. And I was like, oh, I wonder how much everything's changed, and if BKSB is still the gold standard for initial assessment, or if Skills Forward have kind of brought their stuff on, and what
well, BKSB is still the most popularly used, but at the end of the day, it's not about what initial assessment online system you use, because it doesn't matter whether it's Skills Forward or BKSB. It's and this isn't having a skit at either of them. It's flat, and I would say, you know, to a degree, the warm-ups that LearnBox have got, they are
really
different.
good.
I wrote them.
Did you?
Really
Oh. And definitely. I second the kind of catch up with Lucy. I've put a couple of co-bids in with LearnBox for some work recently, and she's just a fantastic person to work with, just generally in the network, isn't she? So, oh, I didn't realise you'd wrote those, Christine. Oh, such a small world.
Indeed, isn't it? Yeah, I updated all their materials for maths and English.
It is good.
And then, so the warm-ups and why the warm, and not that this is a big LearnBox push, but the reason why the warm-ups are different is because they, for the English, free writing piece is an essential part of the whole process, and I just think that is so important, and that's sort of one of the things that if there weren't any particular questions or things that people wanted me to talk about, that's one of the things that I was thinking about covering today anyway, because I think induction is so important, because it sets the scene for what's going to happen to that learner on the apprenticeship. And if it's approached in a way that's right, well, we've got to do this induction now, and you've got to read all these documents and sign these papers, and then right, well, we'll look at some targets, and right, you've done your initial assessment and it says that you're here for maths and English. Well, you've got to do a bit of maths and English really, but we'll put that to one side, we'll leave it now, and then right, okay, so you need to do X, Y, and Z, and you need to have done it by then. So really, if we do this, and you set this target for this, and then we'll do this with this, and that's that. Are you okay with that? Right, okay, that's induction done. Let's get on with the learning. But that's not, you know, you need, I think, if you have an experience like that, you feel that you've just been put into some kind of production line, and you don't really feel that the apprenticeship is going to be necessarily something that you're going to get the value out of, because you feel that you're just being put into a process. And I think, touching on what you were saying before, Adam, about colleges, I think colleges are still very much in that mindset. Yeah. They're still very much, and a lot of providers are as well, if I'm honest. They're still very much in the mindset of where they'll go to an employer and they'll say to an employer, right, what are your needs? Right, well, you need people to do X, Y, and Z. And that's because that's what they deliver, not necessarily it's what the employer needs. So I think, you know, when the whole induction process should be about learning as much about the learner and what their skills and abilities are across the whole piece. What do they know about maths? What do they know about English? What's their digital skills like? What is their job role? So looking at their job description, maybe even looking at their CV to see what they've done in the past, and flagging up against the knowledge, skills and behaviours of their apprenticeship, what they're okay with, what they need a lot of work on, and what they've nailed. And that then sets the whole parameter of what their program should look like. But also talking to the employer, you know, because the employer has a big say in what's going on, and they need to sign off for endpoint assessment. So if it is that the employer's got certain aspirations for this particular apprentice, you need to know about them. Talking to the line manager, you know, well, what's the written work like for this young person or this person on the apprenticeship? You know, are there any areas that you feel that they need to develop? And very often it can be things like, well, you know, the emails that they send are not great, and they could be structured in a better way. That can be added to the learning plan. And I think one of the things that the last few weeks and months have shown is how useful online communication through things like Teams and Zoom can be. So where people used to rock up and do an induction for possibly 2 or 3 hours, you can drip feed it. You can connect with your new apprentice very easily and then give them something to do. So maybe that you can say to them, right, okay, so I'll contact you again. We'll have another Zoom in a week. And in that time, can you read the health and safety information and the safeguarding information? And then when you connect with them a week later, you can do a bit of a check on their knowledge, answer any questions, and then set them something else to do, so that it's stretching out and finding out more about them and what are their motivators and, you know, what are their career aspirations and goals, and getting them to make decisions from day one, because that's helping them to take ownership. And even ask them, you know, what order do you think you want to do things in, and what targets do you want to set? Do you have any projects coming up that you think might, you know, we might be able to fit in with all of this? And tailor the program very much around them and what the employer needs. And then when it gets to endpoint assessment, you've got a learner who has got the knowledge, skills and behaviours that they need, and they can shout about it with confidence, because they know how they've progressed and they've taken ownership of it. And I think, you know, there's all these things that need to be woven into it, like, you know, the speaking and listening, the way the speaking and listening needs to be done now for functional skills. They have to be able to do it. It's not just a sign off anymore, you know. And I think, but when you go to EPA, you have to be able to stand up and very often do a presentation or have an interview or a professional discussion. And if you can't do that with confidence and competence, your assessor is going to say, nah, and not sign you off.
In terms of that, Christine, one of the challenges, debates we have, what I have quite often, is when should you do functional skills? And I personally think it should be done as soon as possible, because without having those skills there, you're then disadvantaging people as they go through. If their English and maths isn't up to scratch, then some of the learning later on in the programme, they're not going to be able to access it, or they're going to struggle with it more than they potentially would do if they'd already done it. The flip side of that is, and I get this as well, yeah, but if we just start them on English and maths and not anything they want to do, they'll switch off because they didn't sign up for English and maths. I think there's a balance. I can see both sides.
That's recruitment, Adam. That's absolutely recruitment, because whether people need to do maths and English officially or not, everybody can develop their maths and English and digital skills regardless.
Yep.
And what Ofsted are looking for, and I personally believe that they will be looking for it even more, because they're looking for starting points and progression. And maths and English is still such an important aspect that they'll be looking to see what are the baseline assessments for the skills for the maths and English against the learner's role, against what the employer needs, and against the standards for the level 2 requirements of the functional skills. What development does that learner need generally? Because even if somebody achieves a level 2 functional skills, they can get a pass with 55, 60%.
Still got that extra.
Very, very few people will get 100%. Just because of the little nuances and the different things. And so there's development for everybody. So this is why induction is so important, and establishing all those baselines. And if you've got learners who are coming on programme who think they don't need to do maths and English, it's being sold to them wrong. The maths and English is an integral part.
I'm not saying that they don't think they need to do it. I'm just kind of saying that from a perception point of view, you don't sell them on the idea of further staff development and training or whatever because they do maths and English. It's about becoming a team leader or becoming a senior healthcare worker or becoming a marketing executive, and that's what people want to do.
Absolutely, but it's how you can, and I think this is where the marketing comes in. It's, yes, I totally agree with you, but in order to be a better any one of these, then you can improve your communication skills, which is English. And I think, you know, this thing about the functional skills, I think that should be completely, you can get extra money for it if they need to do the qualifications, but the maths and English should be developed anywhere. And so this is why talking to the employer and finding out from the learner and looking at things like a piece of free writing that they've done, because there are so many errors that people make. You know, young people, they do text speak, they use lowercase I for the possessive I. They don't always use capital letters for proper nouns. You know, they don't always write in compound sentences. They'll very often just write in simple sentences. You don't get paragraphs, you know, all this kind of stuff. These are quick fixes. And I think these are the kind of things that you can very easily show where it benefits them to develop their maths and English. And so with managers as well, for things, and even, you know, like healthcare workers, budgets are important, medication is important, that's maths. You know, doing timetable. Stop laughing, Erica. I've been wound up again, haven't I?
No, I've just direct messaged Paul saying I think we can leave these two to it. I think they're just going to keep going. And that's why Paul started laughing, and so did I.
Well, it all started, and why Erica asked
about, you know, God, medical staff and overdosing patients and so on by misreading medication. I thought, oh God. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, like in cleaning, there's a lot of, because we have a lot of people in the sort of what's considered to be the lower academic vocations, if you like, things like hospitality, cleaning, care workers, things like that. Very often English is not their first language, and their understanding of some of the important stuff they need is quite low. And there's been all sorts of issues around people using cleaning products at not the correct dilution rate, which has an impact on profitability and you know, budgets and stuff like that, but also it can be very dangerous. And I think it's understanding the roles that you're working with and the benefits of having strong maths and English in those roles. And I think that's where the marketing and the recruitment, that's where they can really benefit. And sorry, Adam, I don't mean to be on my soapbox and lecture, but this is a bit of a, you know, and I don't want this to sound like a lecture, but I think all this came about, and why Erica and Sarah asked me to do a masterclass was because we 2 weeks ago, we were talking about something similar, and I talked to them about a situation where I was doing some standardization work with some other observers, and they were saying, and it was to look for the maths and English, and they couldn't find it. And it was about just recognizing that we use maths and English all the time, and people are very complacent often about the maths and English they use because they're in that unconscious competence. They don't recognize the skills they're using all the time, and so they then kind of dismiss the value of maths and English. And I think it's helping to recognize what they are good at and helping them to get even better. And I think the other piece of work for a lot of providers, Adam, is with the tutors, because the tutors don't know the value of maths and English.
And it's the mindset as well, though, isn't it? It's the mindset. If it's not my job, I'm not a maths teacher, I don't know, I don't like maths. Yeah.
I think we have got specialist functional skills tutors, which is great because then you've got an expert teaching it, but that does lead to what you've just said, is there the regular tutor, whatever subject it is, kind of goes, talk to your functional skills tutor, and actually it's everybody
absolutely
picking it up. And yes, okay, the delivery being done by a specialist is probably beneficial, but actually unless everyone's supporting it, you just kind of pouring it into a black hole because no one else picks up on it and it's done in isolation. It
Yes.
needs to be threaded through the whole thing.
Absolutely.
Everybody needs to pick up on spelling, punctuation, grammar,
absolutely,
all of that.
It needs to be integrated. And the thing is, Adam, where yeah, I mean, great, you've got subject specialists, and the subject specialists can address some of the areas for learners that are more challenging, or maybe work with the learners that have got specific learning difficulties like dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, that kind of thing. Or, you know, if there is a real challenge that maybe the tutor can't overcome because they don't feel that they've got the skill set to do it. Absolutely, that's what the subject specialists are for. But what the maths and English people can't do, what the specialists can't do, is understand all the nuances in the different vocations. And this is where the vocational tutors have also, for me, they've got a duty of care to be able to help their apprentices or their learners understand where they can use this maths and English that is so important, you know, because otherwise it does just feel like something else that's just bolted on. And so people will, if they do feel a little bit like, you know, I'm not great at maths, and then they go to see somebody that helps them with their maths, and then they come back to their vocation, they're not going to feel any better about maths because there's been no connection at all.
So Christina, what would you, because there's two schools of thought, isn't there? There's a school of thought where you've got your specialist tutors delivering functional skills.
Yeah.
And you've got the other one where it's the responsibility of the vocational tutor to deliver everything, including the functional skills. Which one would you say delivers better results?
Both. So my personal belief is that you should have the vocational tutors delivering the functional skills as far as they can.
Mm-hmm.
So, because with a lot of, certainly in your higher level professions, people won't need much support for maths and English. All they'll perhaps need is a bit of brush up or revision or review, and then they're ready for, if they need to do the assessment, then they're just ready then for the formal assessment. And the constant integration of maths and English is vocationally related. And because the tutors are vocational specialists, they should be able to know where the maths and English is being integrated. And if they're not confident with that, then maybe the specialists could support the vocational tutors to see where the maths and English is within their, if you like, scheme of work.
Mm-hmm.
And then they can easily then flag up, okay, so this is an English skill that you need to be using really well. So let's say we took this scenario that you have to have a meeting. So the English skills that you need to be able to use to be effective in this kind of environment is that you need to know what you're talking about. So you need to have done some preparation. So you might need to do a piece of research, which might need to make notes. So then you've got, well, there's different kinds of notes that you can take. So maybe just bullet points, but you'll need to be able to research some information, maybe read some documentation, pull out the key points. So you've got skimming and scanning that needs to be done there. Make some notes, and then to be able to put them into a logical order. So you've got sequencing, and then be able to present it effectively. There's massive communication skills that are needed to be able to do that in a way that works and people are confident with it. And so, you know, all this like, oh, I don't like doing presentations. Well, presentations, really, standing up in front of somebody and doing a presentation is no different than opening your mouth in a meeting. It's just at a different scale. You've got that same process that you need to follow in order to know what you're talking about. And so, you know, people will have information that they might not need to research, but you still need to think about it. I mean, God, I've been doing this for donkey's years, and oh, look, even I've got a note of what I want to cover today. You know, it's just what you do.
Most of it's just off the top of my head, I'll be honest.
No, but well, okay, yes, but you're responding rather than presenting, aren't you? And so, you know, because Erica asked me to do this as like a masterclass, I had to think about what I might talk about unless somebody came up with something. So then it was down to me really to make sure that I had something to talk about. Not something I usually struggle with, I have to say. So yeah, and I think, you know, going back to what you were saying about which is the best model, so you can use your subject specialists to support the vocational tutors to help them to be able to know where the maths and English sits and how they can draw it out and develop it. You could maybe use your vocational subject, your subject specialist to support the vocational tutors to be able to draw the information out from induction, to be able to sort of plan some good development and look at key things that maybe learners could develop for the maths and English throughout the programme, and they could see then measured success. So going back to the free writing, if you identify that there are things that somebody needs to develop and that development is targeted, then at say a 3-monthly review, then you can get them to do another written piece and you can compare the difference and they can see the distance travelled, and then they will feel better because their writing style has improved. And a lot of the time with learners, the barriers you get is it's because nobody likes to look stupid, and they feel that they're not good at something, and so they build this barrier that says, oh, I'm no good at spelling, or I'm no good at maths, because then that almost validates why they don't spell well.
Yeah.
But it's getting past that and helping them to understand.
So you wouldn't recommend leaving it for the last 3 months of an apprenticeship to do your functional skills then?
Well, if the learner has got a lot of skill development that they need to do, back-ending the functional skills is bad, but
yeah.
I think equally so, front-ending it is bad as well.
I get that front-ending it intensively isn't necessarily the best thing. However, I would say that for those learners who do need more support and are starting from a lower base, so if they're starting at entry 2 or entry 3, first off, you've got to question the recruitment a little bit, but entry 3 you can probably work with. I would probably suggest actually front-ending to get them to level 1 quite quickly,
yeah,
and then kind of getting them to level 2 over a longer period, and as you say, doing it drip feeding and kind of little and often.
Yeah, so it might be worth considering changing some of the terminology, because sometimes it's the terminology that can cause some of the issues. Because front-ending suggests that you get it out of the way at the beginning and then you don't need to do maths and English again. Leaving it till the end suggests that it's not important and it's a tag on.
Yeah.
Okay. The best model is to do a really robust screen. I'm back at induction again, aren't I? A really robust screen at induction, so that you get a really good picture of what the learner's abilities are for reading and interpreting information, writing information, communicating verbally, their basic maths ability, but also their problem solving ability. So you need some kind of infrastructure in place that can help to check all of those and give you a baseline. And then once you've got that baseline, because learners will have a spiky profile, so you may have somebody that's overall screened as an entry 3, but actually their speaking and listening's okay, their reading's okay, it's just their writing that's a bit dodgy, and that's what's letting them down. So you can focus then quite targeted for that learner on the things that they need to do to get them to that level 1 standard. And you can plan that. So if you've got somebody who's on a 12-month program, then you really want to have them to have achieved their level 1, maybe at the end of 3-4 months at the outside. Because if they're going from entry 3 and they need to get to level 2, then the push from level 1 to level 2 is going to need more time. So it's building that in earlier, but not making it that it's like, let's get this out of the way and then we can do that. And it's about the learner being assessed when they're ready. And I think that's where, you know, this front ending and back ending, it's when that learner's ready. So
Can I ask a question, Christine? So
yeah.
what we do is when we build a delivery program for an apprenticeship standard, obviously we've got every learner in mind, and what we do is when we put that program build together, we state within that which are the mandatory elements, and what we mean by that, everything's mandatory in terms of the standard, but in terms of they can't be shifted. So, and you know, we all know that the mandatory elements within every apprenticeship standard need to be covered. Then we'll look at the standard specific stuff, and we'll decide what running order, what the ideal running order would be, and what things can be moved around, specific to the learner and the employer and so on, and others that can't be. And we develop the rationale behind that. And then we look at, specifically from a maths and English perspective, what opportunities there are to cover maths and English, and you know, what then drill down specifically what elements of maths and English. And then once we put all of that together, we then assess those levels of maths and English that are required for those particular elements within those modules, if that makes sense. And what that does then is, when we are coming back to the, you know, the screening, the initial assessment, the diagnostic, and like you say, every learner is different with a spiky profile, that helps us to inform what needs to be covered by when to enable them to cover that part of the standard.
Yes. No, that's a really good way of doing it. It's almost like, you know, the flipped learning situation, where you give the work to the learners to look at so that they can prepare for the class, and when you have the class, you build on the learning. You know, it's that is the good practice stuff. And when you've got your vocational tutors working hand in hand with your specialists, again, this is the other nuance of the specialists, Adam. So if you've got something where the vocational tutor knows, let's just use hairdressing as an example, because hairdressers, they're getting better, but they don't think they can do ratio. So let's say you, as the vocational tutor, know that you're going to be doing the colouring unit with your learners, and you know from the screening that ratio is an issue. And if you feel that the level of teaching that you need to give to that learner for ratio is beyond what you're able to do, that's when you can helicopter the subject specialist in to support for the learning of ratio. So when you go on to do the ratio unit, you're then consolidating the knowledge that then they have, and you're not then physically trying to overcome all the barriers and all the misunderstandings around ratio, because that's been nailed. And then you're just integrating it into the vocational area and giving value to what that maths learning was.
I always enjoyed teaching ratio. It gave me an excuse to bust out a Tom Cruise film. Anyone remember Cocktail?
Yeah.
I was like, right, that's how we're teaching. So I got some fake.
You just wanted to be Tom Cruise. That's all it was, Adam, wasn't it? Nothing to do with the ratio at all. You just wanted to flip cocktail shakers around.
That's why he's got a new hairstyle as well.
Yeah. So I always found that actually putting it, maybe not contextualizing it to the industry, but actually going, how can I make this relevant to someone's life? Because that's when they're going to actually really absorb it and take it in, and then they will find ways of applying it to other situations. So it was a good thing. We watched a little clip. We all had to go at spinning the bottles and dropped them and everything. But then it was about making the cocktails, and it was 2 parts this to 4 parts that. Well, why can't you turn that into, and I was doing this with construction students, so it then became making cement or making concrete or plaster. So it was actually then taking it on, then taking away the spirits or the mix or whatever, and you go, well, this is just pure ratio, so you can do it, and you were already doing it, but it's in a different way. So I think that's probably maybe
and that's the good practice way to do it, Adam. And I think because you understand it and you're a subject specialist, you know, you taught functional skills, that's the kind of way that then, if the vocational tutors see that, then it starts to make sense to them. And you've got that transferability element, and that's the bit that's really key. Because I think, you know, it was a real eye-opener for me when I started working with hairdressers, and I had my hair coloured, and they didn't think they could do ratio. I nearly fell off the chair. But they didn't realise that mixing colours and ratio were one and the same. And I think, you know, what you're saying with that method as well, that leads beautifully into then teaching the Singapore bar method, which is a visual way of showing ratio, which if somebody struggles with ratio, that method just seems to make perfect sense because it's very visual. I think people who understand ratio struggle to get their head around it, but those who don't, the penny suddenly drops. And I think that's where your subject specialists have real value, because they can be used as specialists.
Do you think that it's actually worth putting vocational tutors through their functional skills with subject specialists, even if they've already got it?
Yeah.
You know, this is something we used to do as CPD over like summer or whatever, is I used to have, it was bricklayers, plasterers, tilers, construction trades. One day we were doing something about angles, and they were like, oh, that's the 2, 3, 4 method. You're like, well, yeah, why do you, like, what do you, and they go, well, that's how we set our corners. We measure 2, 3 and 4, and we know that if that's 2, that's 3 and that's 4, we've got a right angle, and then we're square. But they didn't think of it as a right angle. They were saying we've got a square corner. You're like, well, yeah, but that is a right angle. So a lot of the time it's just, like you say, it's not that people aren't able to do it, but they don't add 1 and 1. And they don't kind of realise that what they're doing is actually maths. They just see it as building. And you go, yeah, but you're using maths to build.
Absolutely. And the other thing as well is loads and loads of people. I think certain things, if I had £1 for everything people said to me, and certain things, you know, like I can't do decimals. Oh, so you don't read digital clocks or deal with money then?
Yeah.
You know, or algebra, I can't do algebra. Well, what you've just said about the 2, 3, 4, that's algebra. It's a form of algebra, because if they know that one side is, let's say the 4 side is 8, then they'll know that the 3 side is 6 and the 2 side is 4. And it's because of that, you know, it's the repetition. People don't think that calculating area, it's a form of algebra, but people have this like, oh, algebra, no, there's no value for that.
I think as well, there's a lot of potential to embed functional skills.
Integrate, like, Adam, integrate.
Sorry.
No, it's just in my experience, embedding has meant that the maths and English has been pushed in so hard that it's disappeared and nobody knows where the maths and English is. And integrating is more about celebrating the maths and English that is there, and you know, helping it to really shine, and for people to recognise, because most people are better at maths and English than they believe. Most of the general people out there.
Just to get that right then, embedding is blitzing up your broccoli and putting it into a soup so you get it like that. But integrating is cutting it up smaller.
Yes.
Okay.
I love the visual element of that then. That's fantastic.
Yeah, so you can see the broccoli and you know it's broccoli soup and it's not just this green mess.
But this is very, you know, what the conversation that you guys are having is very similar to some of the conversations I've been having around, you know, the only limitation here is your own creativity and your own imagination to get this stuff right, isn't it? And good tutors and trainers, it's the same with virtual learning. The only limitation is what you want to do with a PowerPoint and how you want to play it. So I think sometimes potential barriers might be that either confidence or competence in the tutor or the trainer around making this interesting and visual and different, and being able to speak about, you know, the different parts of the cocktail or what the analogy is. And I see a real gap in, going back to your point, Adam, around CPD, I see a real gap sometimes with actually the support that we give tutors and trainers to just be able to think more laterally sometimes about this stuff.
I think a lot of the time, have you got functional skills level 2? Yes, okay, that's a box ticked, off you go and teach it, but there's not the actual development of teaching. I mean, I did my level 5 literacy ages ago now, but it gave me different ways of approaching it, because, you know, I've got my degree, I've done my PGCE, and I've got my level 2 functional skills, but actually that level 5 literacy gave me different ways of thinking about passing that knowledge on, and it was useful to do that, and that helped me do things in a different way, which was really good. But I think vocational tutors don't necessarily have that, because they're just expected to be able to do it. Well, you're a tutor, you've got your level 2 functional skills, there you go. But you wouldn't expect someone to have their assessor qualification and be able to go and teach barbering if they're a bricklayer, or
but I think there is that definite fine balance, I think, between having the vocational subject covered by vocational people, but understanding where the maths and English and digital stuff is, and having the subject specialists that can be used for those cases where either the staff need support in order to be more confident, or the learners need that deeper level of teaching, and that's where their skills can really come to the fore. And I think, you know, one of the things that I've realised as I've been doing this journey over many, many years is I left school in 1975 and maths was my best subject. I've always been good at maths because my first job was a wages clerk, and then I went on to be a bonus clerk and a work study engineer. Maths has always been part of what I did within my work, because maths for me was more natural. I'm far better at maths now since I've been teaching it than I was just by my own skills. And I think it's that different mindset again, as Erica was saying before. When you start to support other people to help them to develop their maths and English, yours automatically becomes better. And if a tutor has got a level 2 functional skills, they've already achieved something that their learners haven't. So they've already got that higher level of ability. Even if they only scraped it, it doesn't matter. They've still got that higher level of ability. And going back to what you were saying about putting them through the functional skills, even if they've got a level 2 functional skills, I think yes, because the assessments are now different. And unless they experience the assessments for themselves, they can't really appreciate what they're like. And the easiest way to do it is to do them themselves. And it was one of the, I mean, I'm a slow burner for a temper. But when I blow, oh my God, you know, and I'd given my team, and they were subject specialists, I had given them every CPD session they could have. Stop laughing, Paul. I am a natural redhead. This is dyed, but I am a natural. So I'd given them every potential CPD they could have. I'd given them every resource they could have. And then when we sat down to do self-assessment, they came back at me and they said, or they came to senior management and they said, we don't really understand what's needed to go from key skills to functional skills. Well, that was it. I absolutely flipped. And I just said, and Joe Harris, do you know Joe, Adam?
Yeah.
Yeah, Joe Harris, even for years and years afterwards, she quoted back at me. I just said, well, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And she just thought that was hilarious. And then I just said to them, right, that's it. You're doing the tests. You're doing the functional skills test, and then you will see what all this is about. And that was the best thing that I ever got them to do, because they did those assessments and then they said, yeah, get it now.
And would you say that annually is too much, but maybe every other year they can just sit through as a refresher?
Or you get them to do a diagnostic. Because if they do a diagnostic, then that even, because one of the things about doing the functional skills is they can do the functional skills and pass, and they can do it the next year and pass, and they can do it the year after and pass, or they could do it every 5 years and pass. But that doesn't necessarily tell you anything other than they've got a level 2.
Yeah.
What if you get them to do a diagnostic, that then identifies areas of where they can still develop, and those can then be targeted into their CPD. And it might be something that you want to do as an annual appraisal. So before they go for their appraisal, they do a screening on the diagnostic, I'm not going to charge you much here, Adam. There's lots of notes going there. So they do the diagnostic, and then that diagnostic report is used as part of their appraisal. You can compare last year's with this year's and praise them for any distance travelled, because if you use BKSB, it's RAG rated.
Mm-hmm.
So if they've gone from a red to an amber, then that's a progress, and then you can celebrate that, and you can recognise, you know, that they have made some progress with that. You could maybe break it.
Christine.
Stop laughing.
Erica, are you going to behave yourselves, or are we going to have to send you out? Where are you sat at the back of the classroom sniggering? And
I'm sorry, I can't help myself.
Erica's just laughing because I think, you know, I've been wound up and let off. It's like this little toy, you know.
I've just said to Paul, I'm going to call this recording when Adam met Christine.
Thanks very much, but we have met before anyway. Sorry,
I'm sorry, I'm being naughty. I'll stop.
I'll shut up, you know.
No, it's really good stuff. Please don't feel that I'm, you know, it's really good stuff. It's interesting listening to the two of you, that's all.
This is the modern day equivalent of standing at the front of the class and seeing people pass notes just along and burst out laughing.
Yeah.
And I was always that kid that did that at school, so you wouldn't be surprised to hear that. So I was always the one getting in trouble.
I do have another call at 11, so I think that's probably a break to wrap up with.
Yeah. But I think that would be a good model, Adam, and that's something that I would consider. Certainly, you know, as the integration is much more important now, and what Ofsted is looking for. And then I think, you know, that is something as well that you can shove under the nose of Ofsted as part of your CPD, because maths and English is not going away, and it's so important. So if you can show that you are, for want of a better word, screening your tutors every year to see what development they need and helping them to progress. And again, that's where you can use your subject specialists. They can support the tutors to develop what they need.
Can I quickly ask Adam a question before we all have to shoot off? And just coming right back to the beginning when you were talking about delivering AEB courses alongside apprenticeships, as long as they weren't there wasn't any crossover. What happens from an ILR perspective, you know, when, for example, you do the search on the learner record, etc., and it shows that they're currently on, say, an apprenticeship? How do you get past that?
I don't think you need to. As far as to be fair, Paul, I kind of tell my MIS team, this is what this person's enrolling on. But with the change in the funding rules, I don't think there's any flag that stops you.
It won't stop you, but what it do is it will flag and say they're currently on. So what you're saying is that you just need to make a note somewhere to say, we're aware they're on an apprenticeship. They're doing this outside of those hours. It's not, there's no crossover.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't put money on that, but I think that because we're not putting our team leaders on a level 2 team leading, I think it's fairly obvious that they're not duplicating any funding, right. And there may well just be a little flag that says this is part of a wider program that includes their main apprenticeship, their level 2 certificate, their functional skills, another level 2 certificate. And I think the way that it works is that we've created that course that then has those sub layers. So we enroll them onto the course and then it filters down that they're on the other stuff.
Would you mind asking the question and find out? And only because I'm thinking it from an audit perspective. If it all of a sudden flagged up, all of these learners are on an apprenticeship and on other learning, because it would flag up, you know, not as a data error, but an alert on the PSATs and whatever. Then from an ESFA perspective, if there was a sudden spike, they might go in, might trigger an audit, is what I'm saying. So
I think the only thing you need to be concerned about, Paul, is dual funding. That's what they're looking for. Yeah. So as long as you can validate that the course they're doing is not a dual funded as part of the apprenticeship, I don't think you've got any issues. Because with what Adam said, we did something similar under Train to Gain, and the ruling of dual funding hasn't really changed that much. It's just got tougher. So we used to put an employability award alongside maths and English. And then, so the program was funded as a complete thing, but it had these different components. And because the Maths and English is funded outside the apprenticeship pot, then I would see that it's a similar thing. And all they're doing is making sure, and this is where, when you're looking at the apprenticeship, it's prior learning is so important. And then going back to the Maths and English, that's why the screening of the Maths and English and validating what that learner's development need is another essential part. And if you've got all that information and you can justify with your tracking that you don't have that dual funding, you shouldn't have an issue.
Yeah, absolutely get that, Christine. You're absolutely right. And I understand the content aspect. There's something in the back of my head about apprenticeship being classed as full-time learning, and therefore you can only do one, you can't do more than one full-time, if that makes sense. That there's something, I might be totally wrong, but something in the back of my head that's saying something about full-time learning.
You can't count the additional learning as part of the 20% off the job. So anything that's done that's funded outside the apprenticeship is extra hours on top of the 20%.
Yeah, yeah. It's not the 20% I'm worried about either. It's just that I think from a funding perspective, you can only do one full-time course at a time, because there's an assumption there that you wouldn't be able to. But I might be totally wrong, but there's just something in the back of my head. That's
right. I think that the way that we have interpreted that is the AEB funded course isn't full-time, it's a part-time course. So I think that kind of eliminates that. I'll have a look, and I've got the funding rules somewhere in the bits that we've scribbled over, but I think that we've taken the view that the apprenticeship is the full-time course, that's being funded by the levy, that's the 20%, and that's all contained within work hours.
Yeah.
The AEB funded is a part-time course that is, the learner is taking up on their own, effectively off their own back.
Yeah.
That we're providing the funding for. So I think that's how we kind of.
Great. And that's, I mean, because otherwise it opens up an opportunity for us as well, Adam. That's why I'm really interested to see how it can work.
Yeah, and I think that it's one of those, like Erica said at the start, she wasn't aware that you could do that. And I think that it's been out there for, I think it was the start of this year, since August.
Right.
2019. So it's been there for a while now. And I don't think that people are combining funding pots and making up those solutions well enough, and they're just kind of trying to differentiate straight to the apprenticeship. So guys, I'm running a bit late, so I'm going to have to really dash off, but I look forward to reviewing the recording at some point, and I'll make sure that we kind of dress the same as well, because me and Paul have obviously both got dark red on and the ladies have got white.
We got the memo then. Thank you very much, guys. Great conversation.
Have a great week, Adam.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks for your help.
Before you close off the recording, Erica, I just want to sort of just give a little bit extra.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I was going to talk about is like another approach is using observations of a tutor, and using that as a way to help them to see, because when you're observing them, you would be able to pick up what Maths and English is going on, and then have a conversation with them about where maybe they've missed opportunities in the naturally occurring Maths.
So it's part of the OTLA process.
Yeah, and that can be another way to helping them recognise actually they know more about the Maths and English than they're realising. It's just about that flagging up, you know, a little bit like the exercise we were talking about a couple of weeks ago. So that's another approach that I would use, and that can then be built into CPD for the members of staff, that they can then recognise, oh, actually, I'm not that bad at doing this. You know, I do know these things. And I think as well, touching on what you were saying earlier on, Paul, about the way you do the mapping and stuff. I developed straight from the functional skills, the new functional skills qualifications, some self-assessment templates, and you can give those to staff and you help them to use those to see where they feel they are and where maybe areas for development with them. But there's two ways you can do it. You can do it by a level, or you can do it as a staged one. So for example, with the maths, you can take entry 1, entry 2, entry 3, level 1 and level 2 for the number, and sort of build it, because it builds up. And so if you give that even to a learner, if you start with entry 1, they can tick they should be ticking where they're confident with, and then as they start to get to those can't do things, then that might be where you start to think, okay, now we need to draw a line here, because they don't feel confident at that, and just making them go on to do it, it's just going to be a negative experience.
So what you're saying, Christine, is if it were in a grid system, rather than going horizontal on the level, go vertical on through the levels, but per...
Yeah, so that might help with, as well with what you were talking about, looking at what's needed at different levels. And you said that you were doing that kind of benchmarking. Well, it might help to do that kind of benchmarking within what you're doing profile wise to help fit within the scheme of work. And then you might find that, you know, oh, well, we need to cover fractions there, but the fractions we need is actually only at entry 3, and this learner is at level 1 for fractions, so they're okay with that, if that makes sense. And that might help with some of your profiling.
Brilliant. Thank you, Christine. You've covered a huge amount as part of that, and I think those people who are watching back the recording will get a lot of value out of that. So
good, I hope so.
Thank you, absolutely. And do forgive my childish behaviour on.
No, it was just funny. I mean, that's one of the nice things.
I'm not apologising.
Oh, fair enough.
No, I mean, it's one of the nice things about these calls, isn't it? I mean, we have some good discussions, but we have them in a way that is almost light-hearted, and I think that as well puts across the message that it doesn't all have to be dead serious and boring.
You can have fun while doing all this, can't you?
Absolutely.
That's one of my values, is fun. So
yeah, good.
Thank you so much. Great to see you both. And I'll pop the recording out a bit later on today, and then I guess we need to think about how else we kind of reinvigorate people, and what else we want people to think about and what they want to bring to these calls, because it's gone a little bit flat again, hasn't it, in terms of and I wonder if that's because people are just back to work kind of from a post-COVID perspective.
Do we need to change the time where we have the calls, maybe?
Yeah, well, people were kind of happy to change from the Thursday to the Wednesday and to go fortnightly, weren't they? So, like you said, maybe it's a time in the day. I don't know.
So I've signed up for it's called a Sustain program through Liverpool City region. It's funded through, but the company's called Sustain. I'm not sure if they're getting funding from different regions or not. It's one of the questions I want to ask them. But it's really focusing on how you basically kickstart your business again, get new business in on the back of obviously the impact of COVID-19. We had our first session yesterday, and it was really good. And actually, one of the guys that I was in one of the breakout rooms with is also from a training provider. His name's Ian Green, so I'm going to invite him to the group.
Brilliant. But
I'm thinking actually some of the stuff that's coming out of it, and the reason why I'm asking about the funding is actually, make it available to the group so that anyone can look at the program and join it themselves if they think it'll be beneficial. But if not, is maybe trying to take some of the bits out of it and maybe deliver something to the group along similar lines.
So you can do the masterclass next time then, Paul.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to do it, whether it'll be next time, because then we'll have done 2 or 3 sessions. It might be that it needs to be the time after, so that I've had all 3. So we condense it all into one. But I'm happy to do either. But yeah, absolutely. And
I think that's a great idea.
I might, he won't know this yet, but I might even rope Ian into doing some of it as well. Well, because him being another training provider, it will give another aspect from his perspective as to how it's working and what impact it's having on his business.
I mean, I think what's really interesting, Erica, is that, there's been, like Sarah and I was trying to think who said, but there was 1 or 2 people who said in the chat that they couldn't make it, but they were looking forward to the recording.
Yeah, there's about 4 or 5 people actually, wasn't there? Linda and a few people,
Linda, she was one. So I think, we have to have people on the call in order to be able to have the discussions.
In the first place,
Yeah, because you can't have the discussions. I mean, like, I knew it would have been you and me, Erica, but then it would have been very much led by what I thought maybe people needed to know, whereas Adam really put some extra bits and asked some questions that I'm sure that other people would be having similar kind of questions. So I think maybe it's looking at the time of the day.
Guys, I am going to have to go, because otherwise when Adam met Christine is going to be a feature length.
And on that note, I'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Have a great week.
Love it. Thanks, guys. Take care. Bye.